I'd like to talk a little bit about poling. Poling is one of the two jobs in racing. Usually the poler is in the back of the canoe, and they're called the poler because they use this pole to actually push the canoe. Some people call it a push pole, or simply a pole. Some college students broke our good pole, so we're using this backup pole. It's actually a tree pruning pole. Fiberglass, it's working out pretty well. And it's got a little fork on the back. It was jammed into the hollow fiberglass core, and that fork just helps get a little more purchase on the ground as we push through the rice. See here, we're pushing through some pretty tall rice. It's kind of fun, but a lot of work, especially when it's really dense. Okay, so the poler, the primary job of the poler is to guide the knocker through the rice at a pace that they could knock it efficiently. So this would be a good pace for Katrina, who has a camera now, if she were knocking. And you want to try and keep a steady pace. And when the mud is soft, sometimes you find the pole gets stuck in the mud. So there's a couple tricks you could do to keep the pole from getting stuck. Partway through, if you give it a little lift up and then back in, it'll reset the angle of the pole so that it won't still be at the original angle as you tilt backwards, and then it gets stuck. So just give a little up and down. Sometimes I do that twice. That keeps the end of the pole near the surface. So ideally, if this rice and now Wapato wasn't so thick, I would actually be able to give the canoe a little bit of an extra push at the end. There we go. Reset my pole quick enough that the canoe could actually continue moving at a nice steady rate. Alright, so it's not just the rate that we need to be worried about, it's also the course. The knocker is up in the front of the canoe, in some cases in the back, knocking the rice, and the knocker has a reach of about, maybe 2 feet on either side of the canoe. So that means when we turn around at the end of the patch and start going back, I want to stay 4 feet away from my previous path so that we're not wasting any rice, and we're not knocking rice double, because you just don't get any more the second time you knock it. It's already been knocked off. So that's the primary job of the poler. Now there are some, besides that little loosening trick, there are some tricks to keeping the boat on course. I like to sight on at a tree in the distance, and that helps me keep in a straight line. And you could turn the boat a number of different ways. You could actually push sideways on the push pole, or sometimes you could use you plant it close like this, and you could actually scooch the canoe a little bit off, lever the gunnel of the canoe. And likewise, you could also get an angle like this and pull a little bit with the canoe. That's a little bit trickier to do, especially when it's right next to the boat. But as the end of the pole gets farther back, then the stern isn't in the way, and you could guide it that way a bit more. So when we get into some open water, I'll show you some other maneuvers. Now Katrina's not knocking, so I'm just going to pull us with rapidity through the rice. Alright, so here we are in a creek, and you can see that the pole will actually work in water, almost like an oar, to turn, or a paddle to turn the canoe. Now it's probably too deep here for me to, the water's about 6 feet deep here, so it's a lot of work. But oftentimes at the end of the row, what I do is I try and turn the canoe with the pole, and sometimes give a backwards push to line myself back up with the place I just came out of the rice. And I could start pushing back in to the ice like that. The pole gives you a lot of stability and a lot of leverage. So there's no harm in leaning really hard on the pole. You can really turn the canoe over, and if the pole's in good ground, you can push really hard and lean your weight on it. One thing you want to always avoid, though, is having the end of the pole pass over the canoe. Usually it comes up with a whole bunch of muck and grime on it, so you never want to pass it over the canoe, or that'll get in your ice. So I always swing it around the backside of the canoe. I try to do a lot of my turning in more open spots, because you just lay the rice down and make a mess if you're turning in the middle of a rice bed. So I try and go in straight lines between open water patches if I can. If the water's deep enough and you're in rice, you could actually use the pole a little bit like a paddle even as you're going through the rice. So instead of planting the pole behind you and pushing, you could plant the pole a little bit in front of you and then start pushing like you normally would, and that'll give you more travel between poles and will save yourself some extra work. Here it's so deep, I'm just using the pole exclusively like a paddle. Not the most efficient, but just to get over to the other side of the creek here. Alright. We'll zoom a little bit more and then call it good. I should be singing in Italian right now, or maybe French. Okay.